Who decides if an armed conflict is international or non-international? In recent days, the classification of armed conflicts has gained significant attention. With ongoing conflicts around the world, many are asking, who decides if an armed conflict is international or non-international? Understanding this distinction is vital for humanitarian efforts and international law. The classification of an armed conflict is determined by several key factors and legal frameworks. International humanitarian law, which includes the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, provides the primary guidelines for this classification. International armed conflicts occur between two or more states. The Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols apply to these conflicts. The classification as an international armed conflict is typically straightforward when the conflict involves the armed forces of two or more states. However, it becomes more complex when non-state actors are involved or when states support armed groups in another state. Non-international armed conflicts take place within the territory of a single state. These involve government forces and organized armed groups or between such groups. The classification of a conflict as a non-international armed conflict is often more challenging. It requires the armed groups to be sufficiently organized and the conflict to reach a certain level of intensity. Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions and Additional Protocol Roman II provide the legal framework for these conflicts. The decision on whether a conflict is international or non-international is typically made by the parties involved. International organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross, and sometimes by international courts such as the International Criminal Court. These determinations are based on the nature of the conflict, the involvement of state forces, and the level of organization and intensity of the armed groups involved. In practice, the classification of a conflict can be contentious and may vary depending on the interests and perspectives of different actors. For instance, states may deny that a conflict is international to avoid international scrutiny or obligations under international humanitarian law. Conversely, non-state actors may claim that a conflict is international to gain international recognition or support. The Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols provide a framework for protecting civilians and ensuring that armed conflicts are conducted in accordance with humanitarian principles. The principles of distinction, proportionality, and humanity are central to these laws. They aim to minimize harm to civilians and civilian objects during armed conflicts. As conflicts continue to unfold globally, the classification of these situations remains a pressing issue. Understanding who decides the nature of these conflicts is essential for those interested in humanitarian law and global affairs.